Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome back to another Northside Baseball video. I wish I was coming to you with better news, but as always, I don't want to say as always, but for the track record of the Cubs, here we are. The Cubs brought it back for two games, and then, we died. We died against the Brewers, and here we are now at the end of our season to learn from our mistakes, and Brandon and I are here to talk about it, recap the entire season, and kind of reflect. So, Brandon, let's reflect on the Cubs 2025 season and look towards better days in 2026.
Yeah, I'll show my hand here a little behind the scenes. I did tell Ethan that after the Cubs lost game two, that this is exactly what I predicted. Not because I didn't want the Cubs to win. Obviously, I wanted the Cubs to win, but if you're a Cubs fan, this is what the Cubs do. They've been in the business of breaking hearts for a century plus. This is just how they operate. They had a great comeback. They played great at Wrigley Field. And then the offense just completely died in game five. Seiya Suzuki hit a home run against Jacob Misiorowski and then nothing. There was that sixth inning where they threatened. They had two guys on in the middle of the order up, and then Kyle Tucker did nothing. Seiya Suzuki hit a line drive into the gap that was caught, and then Ian Happ did nothing. And that was sort of the end of the season, really. The pitching was otherwise pretty good. They only gave up three solo home runs, but obviously in a game when you only score one run, that's enough to end it. So just disappointing, especially because it was against the Brewers. The Cubs clearly had the talent to beat these guys. I mean, they came extremely close. Obviously just getting behind 2-0 in this series really, really doomed them. But yeah, I mean, overall in the season, it's weird because it's like objectively a success, like taking like a bird's eye view, like, hey, look and listen, they haven't made the playoffs in 5 years. They won a postseason series. They got to game five against the number one seed in the National League. Like they were competitive. Like this was a good Cubs team and they played like it. But like, in the moment, like, on the ground level, it's like man, this should have been better. Like this postseason run should have gone longer. Like this team should have done more. I mean, remember back to early in the season when the Cubs were the number one seed. It feels like that there was a lot of, potential that was left out on the field, and I think that's the most frustrating part of it.
Yeah, and I think what I want to hammer home at the end of the day for our final game was that it was mostly our veterans really pulling the strings here. Seiya Suzuki, Michael Busch, Nico Horner. For the entirety of this season, Pete Crow Armstrong, Matt Shaw, Willie Castro, who are, somewhat I mean, Willie Castro isn't a new player to the MLB, but he's new to the Cubs, right? They didn't produce at all. The one thing I'll also say was even though he didn't produce a hit, seeing Moises Ballesteros kind of get the call up once again, he didn't produce anything, but seeing him being used more by the Cubs was really interesting. And I'm really excited to see what happens with him in 2026. But again, it was a real letdown to see our newer players kind of, not really see their full potential in this nail biter of a game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously, the postseason, this is why the Cubs have a veteran rosters because you expect those guys to produce in the postseason. Obviously, anything you get from the younger guys is gravy. It's just that the Cubs needed the younger guys to produce something. And, we've talked about how the starting rotation wasn't deep enough. We've talked about how Matt Shaw was like a guaranteed out for most of this postseason. I mean, there's been different conversations, but I want to point out the fact that these young guys are still young. Like they got important experience here. Like the Cubs sort of went all in on 2025. They traded for Kyle Tucker, who I'd like to see him come back. I don't think it's going to happen. But I think, like Kyle Tucker's probably going to leave in free agency. The whole bullpen's going to leave in free agency. It's a lot of guys like Nico Horner, Jameson Tyone, Ian Happ. They only have 1 year left on their contracts. There's going to be a lot of like turnover in the next year or two. But it's important to keep in mind, like some of these young guys, Pico Armstrong, Matt Shaw, Ballesteros, Owen Casey, who came up for a bit during the season, like these guys are the foundation of this team going forward, and getting them some of this experience in the playoffs is really important. And hopefully, it's going to be, the next 5 years is going to be the competitive window rather than just like this year and next year. And I think that's sort of the balancing act that the Cubs have to keep in mind right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Up next will be spring training for them, and that's always an exciting time. Again, I think the dark day here is that as every baseball fan knows, is that we're going to go dark for a little bit, and that sucks for any fan of baseball. I think what's to look forward to now is the World Series, whoever comes up next, and we're curious to know who are you rooting for now that the mighty mighty Cubs are out for the rest of the season. But we'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. What went right? What went horribly wrong in these past few games? And as always, what are you looking forward to as the months come on into spring training? And as always, we'll be letting you know what our thoughts are in the comments below.